Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, good evening members, and welcome to Council tonight. You'll see some words on the screen behind me and up on the wall behind Jim over there about coronavirus, so please be aware of them and note them, thank you. Please could we have apologies, please?
Mr. Chair, we've received apologies from councillors Allison, Cruz, McDonough, O'Brien, Rose and Slack.
Thank you very much. Just like Councillor Purdy to just say a few words now, please. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, good evening, members. This is the most important meeting of the year, as older members will know. It not only sets out our financial position, which has to be set by law, but it is crucially sets out our aims and ambitions for this term by the corporate plan and the budget setting to it. As leader, I was ambitious from the start that we should try to move away from the austerity years and into more positive and ambitious territory. In my early conversations with Paul and CLT and many staff of the authority, I was delighted to hear of the same ambition and aspiration, to be able to do more for the benefit of our residents and businesses. I'm also grateful that I was supported in that ambition by the Deputy Leader, Councillor Watson, and our group, and I'm sure you all share my ambition too. Quite simply, those of us that have been around since 2010 have become quite despondent at having to make painful but necessary decisions on cuts to many of our services and lose many of our valuable staff and assets enjoyed by the public. Whilst we're not completely out of the woods yet, and we still need to be financially prudent, we are nonetheless in a better financial position than perhaps expected, and able to present to you tonight this ambitious corporate plan, which I trust you will all embrace and support. I want to thank Steve and his team, therefore, for all the hard work that has been put into the corporate plan, and thanks should also go to the finishing task group for their input into the finished article before you. I just want to touch on a particular point that's been raised by Councillor Bryan this last week, who's in faraway waters, just to reassure him publicly that we are taking a broad approach to this. This isn't just about building council houses for social rent, but the fact that we have got a highly recognised record for building affordable properties in this country, let alone the district, and that will continue, of course, for our local plan and Section 106 agreements for houses to purchase. With the Chief Exec meeting this afternoon, we thought it prudent just to reassure you members, and that's why the notice is up on the screen, of what is taking place and has taken place with regard to contingency plans for coronavirus. Suffice to say that all plans are laid and ready. We're dependent, of course, on Public Health England and the instructions that come through. You'll probably note yesterday in the news that they're now not stating the location of any new cases, although you will be aware this last fortnight cases have broke out near Buxton and in Belper. So last Thursday, for example, the emergency team met at County, and it's just a simple message from me to reassure all members, because I know there's been some emails coming today with suggestions, that everything is in place, and we obviously wait instructions from government, from public health, and the emergency team will kick in as and when necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, well, we've got public participation, and we've got one speaker tonight, Mr. Dodds. Would you like to come up? You're familiar with the procedure. When you're ready, just switch the microphone on.
Thank you, Chair. Council, my comments are about the proposed corporate plan, and specifically I'm hoping that Council will agree to changing one word. The context is the inclusion in this year's plan of a section on air pollution. This inclusion is welcome, but I believe the statement as it stands does not meet the Council's obligation under the 1995 Environment Act. At the bottom, and probably the simplest one to refer to is the paper copy you've got, in the centre pages of your plan, in the right-hand column, next to the picture of the park, there is a commitment to publish an annual report on air quality in the district and identify any appropriate mitigation measures for areas of lower air quality. In the online version, the statement appears in sort of similar form in two places. But this one, that's what I'm referring to. Now, the Environment Act and the associated DEFRA guidance document TG16 make the Council's responsibility quite clear. They are required to identify where national air quality objectives have not been met and then declare an air quality management area in that location. Once the ACMA, as they call it, Air Quality Management Area, is declared, they then have the responsibility to create an air quality action plan. This will include, and I quote from TG16, developing measures that will provide the necessary emission reductions to achieve air quality objectives within specified timescales. So identification is not enough, nowhere near enough. The Environment Act requires action, and that is why I would like the word identify changed to implement. I would also like to question the reasoning behind the choice of March 2021 as the deadline for the start of mitigation action given in the action column of page 3 of the corporate plan, second box down, that's in the online version. Buxton Road in Ashbourne has recorded levels of pollution that have been above national air quality objectives since November 2017. Additional measurement tubes confirm that the high pollution levels extend to include at least 6 homes on Buxton Road, probably more. Is the best that this council can offer to the residents of those homes a policy that only commits to have identified the measures that might reduce the pollution they suffer 3.5 years after measurements indicated that there was an air pollution problem? I do hope that the council could be more ambitious than this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Okay, moving on. Move on to item 3, approval of the minutes of the 16th of January. Moved by Councillor Atkin, seconded by Councillor Donnelly. All those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's unanimous. And then item 4, interest. No interest have been put before Sandra or anyone. Take it as no interest. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the meat of the meeting then. Item 5, the corporate plan. Steve Capes, please.
Chairman, thank you. And I too would like to start by thanking the members of the Member Task and Finish group who had the difficult task of taking a very long list of aspirations and turning them into an achievable list of priorities. And they worked very hard at doing that, and what you see before you today has had their impact on it. So my thanks go to them. There have also been meetings of the Leaders Advisory Group, which is the leaders and deputy leaders of all the political groups, and they've had an impact on it as well. And of course, members, you all had your say during the members' workshop. So thanks to all of you, the result is now a corporate plan that is significantly different, I think, to the earlier one that you saw last year. We believe it's a lot more positive, and certainly the inclusion of if you like, actions or pledges, we will do this, is certainly more positive, and it gives things which residents can indeed hold you to account to. It's got some specific targets in it, and a lot of the detail is in the service plans which follow later on the agenda. The additional thing, as you'll have no doubt noticed tonight, members, is hot off the press, is a draft copy of a what would eventually, we hope, be a PDF booklet, which puts the corporate plan in a more user-friendly format than the council report structure, which we may know and love, but for other than the people in this room, something that's a bit more user-friendly would be more useful. Thanks go to Jim Fern for producing this in record time. It is hot off the press, it has appeared today. It's a draft, and obviously members' comments will be very welcome. The centre pages, Chairman, form what could be, if you like, a poster version to go on notice boards of the corporate plan, and I think that was something that Councillor Ratcliffe suggested we do one of those, so I'm grateful to him for that suggestion. And then the rest of the document would be on our website for anyone to look at, print off if they wished, but it includes a bit more background information, but also usefully, it also reports back on previous achievements in the back 2 pages under our priorities of jobs and homes and clean and green. So that's where we are tonight, Chairman. Be happy to take any questions and indeed any comments to improve these documents in future.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Purdy.
Well, I'm more than happy to move the recommendation, Chair. As I said earlier in my leader's announcement, that this is an ambitious plan for a small authority. It is to be commended. I've said enough. I don't want to be boring to people with what was said before, but I think we need to make that succinct point. We're turning this ship round and we want to move into more positive waters, and I hope members will support it.
Councillor Hobson.
Chair, I'm happy to second this motion. It's been a great result, all of us working together, putting people, place and prosperity at the heart of this new corporate plan. Thank you to everybody that supported it.
Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it'll come as no surprise to members tonight that we feel that we can support this corporate plan. That's purely because of the way that it's been drawn up. Councillor Purdy has been right in saying that his group have been behind a lot of his aspirations, but we must not forget that the Liberal Democrats on this side put an alternative plan forward, and we're very pleased to have not halted the proceedings, but got things out of that draft document into the main corporate plan. We understand that we're not going to get everything. It's a balance. We're quite happy with the balance as it stands. And I know that I'm not going to bring up Mr Dodds's point, because I know my colleague on the right wishes to say a few words on that. But we do support this, and we accept that there is a balance to be met in all plans, and we don't expect everything that we put forward to be included. But the new system of working together, it's supposed to be one council, one voice. This has proved a starting point, and we will play our part in that. But firstly, I'd just like to congratulate officers on the corporate plan. Steve and his team did take all that on board, and he's worked with us, and we're very grateful for that, to Steve and his team. I also like to thank, in the corporate plan, Rob Coggins and his team that have worked on the regeneration of Hurst Farm. That is a big part of what's going to happen in Matlock, in a very area of need. It's early days, but we are very supportive within the community, and I hope on this council of the work that it's doing. As I said, I'm not going to bring up the change of words, but one thing that I was a little bit disappointed about was that at a leaders advisory group we were talking about parks being an issue, and we concentrate on parks within our market towns. And my colleague at the back, Councillor Paulley, did bring up Matlock Bath. And I thought that we came out with a set of words for that, to include market towns and tourist areas. But that doesn't seem to have been put in, but the words where feasible have been put in, which I would have liked anything but only Ashbourne to appear in the park situation to be included. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ratcliffe, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I echo all the comments that have been made, and particularly those of Councillor Flitter in regard to those conversations at the Leaders Advisory Group. Can I just shine the badges of my group in saying that at the outset we pushed for a greater process of discussion and engagement over this, and the results that have emerged have been excellent, and in my mind they've set a new tone and ethos, if you like, for member officer working, a new dynamic that I hope will continue into further strategic policy making. I echo again the thoughts and congratulations of others towards Steve Capes and Paul Wilson and others who felicitated this engagement. I think it bodes well for the future of our council. I know that someone else is going to discuss the detail, as it were, but just to reflect that there does come a time when final decisions have to be made, but we are still looking at a draft document here, so I think a couple of changes would not go amiss, and I would certainly support that which has been forward this evening on the wording of the air quality statement, so that it's amended to read implement and not identify.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. I too am supportive of the motion that's been proffered up by Councillor Purdy to accept the corporate plan. However, I would also like to thank Mr Capes and his team and the members of the various committees that have, and the members that have gone and fed into this. And a substantial amount of time and commitment has been spent by officers and members, and this must be acknowledged. However, having heard the question from Mr Dobbs earlier, I would just like to ask the question whether it is feasible to alter that word identify to implement. If it's not, I would like to seek an amendment, and basically after a minor alteration, just one word, where identify is substituted by implement on both the Appendix 1 of this and 2 of this agenda. The full sentence regarding air quality found on pages 9 and 10 and 11 should be amended to publish an annual report on air quality in the district and implement any appropriate mitigation measures for areas of lower air quality. The word identify infers a recognition of regard that an issue exists, whereas implement means to put things into effect by means of a definitive plan. This is what we must do, not only to recognise air quality issues, but have the desire to implement actions, thereby protecting the health and well-being of our communities. I hope that all members who have an affinity with Ashbourne, regardless of political allegiance, will recognise and support this. Thank you.
I think I'm going to ask Tim to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth bearing in mind that the corporate plan relates to the whole of the district and not just to Ashbourne. And that the annual air quality statement will deal with the whole of the district every year, as it does every year. In relation to Ashbourne, we've got 7 monitoring points currently, of which 2 show levels above the air quality objective in a location going up Buxton Road. We're at the stage now where we're procuring consultants' advice to assist us with determining the area that should be declared, if indeed it should be declared. We expect it to be declared as an air quality management area. The consultant will also point us in the direction of the actions that should be taken to remedy those problems. The pollution that we're dealing with there is traffic pollution, and the remedies are actually in the hands of the county council. The district council does not have the powers to implement the recommendations on its own. So any change of the word to implement would bind the county council to something that they almost certainly couldn't do in that timescale.
Councillor Pawley, please.
Yes, I want to come back to the point. If you look at that centre spread there about improving facilities in parks, we did speak about this at the leaders group meeting. I consider Derwent Gardens and Lovers Walk in Matlock Bath to be one of our important parks, equally as important as Bakewell and the other parks that we've got in market towns. I don't disagree with saying that we should improve facilities in Ashbourne Recreation Ground, but I think that considering that this is a plan for 2020 to 2024, we should be looking at saying that we will improve facilities in parks, including those parks in Matlock Bath. And if there's a pot of money, it should be split by 4, not by 3, so that we're equally given as much money in Matlock Bath. If you look at, we're going to come pretty shortly to the draft service plans for 2021. Now, when we first had our initial copies of this corporate plan, that bullet point saying improving facilities initially in Ashbourne Recreation Ground did say improving facilities in Bath Gardens, Bakewell and Ashbourne Recreation Ground and maintaining facilities in Hawleys Park, Matlock. I asked for that to be changed to a generalised wording, and we've not changed it to a generalised wording, we've changed it to one about Ashbourne Recreation Ground. If you look at the draft service plans for 2021, the second table, which is based a bit on this centre spread here, you will see that the wording says improved facilities in Bath Gardens, Bakewell and Ashbourne Recreation Ground and maintaining facilities in Hawleys Park. So that Bath don't even get mentioned. And I really feel, considering that it's a historic park of great importance and the facilities there are deteriorating at a great rate, you should have a look at the bandstand next to Jubilee Bridge if you don't believe me, that we ought to be putting money in there as well as in those three. And I would like that wording changed.
Okay, thank you very much. Steve can come back on that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just briefly, we did ponder long and hard after that discussion, Councillor Pawley and others, and the recommendation that officers came up with in the end was to make it more general, but in recognition of the which I think all the members of that meeting agreed urgent need in Ashbourne for the work to be there, was to keep that wording in for Ashbourne, but also to say initially in Ashbourne. So that opens the door, given this is a four-year plan for investment in other parks in the future. The other thing that we did do is to suggest that a new action will be included in the service plans, and I'm sorry that isn't on the sheet in the corporate plan, but is in the service plans, which is a new action for Ash's team to review the need and opportunity for improvements in our main parks by March 2023, and the purpose of that is to enable the council to review not just Derwent Gardens and Lovers Walk, but other main parks as the corporate plan moves forward.
Councillor Martin Burford,
Could
please.
I come back on that, Chair?
Just quickly.
Yeah. I think it's for council to decide what goes in the corporate plan and not completely for officers to decide. If I discuss something to a leaders group meeting, I think it ought to be taken into account by councillors, a totality of councillors here. I cannot accept that in our draft service plans 2021 you have mentioned Bath Gardens in Bakewell, Ashbourne Recreation Ground and the facilities in Hawleys Park, but not Derwent Gardens. That to me seems specifically to say we're going to spend money on those three parks and Matlock Bath's not getting a look in.
Okay, your point is made, thank you. I'd like to move now to Councillor Martin Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I agree wholeheartedly with what Councillor Pawley has just said. I do agree, and I did say at the Leaders Advisory Group meeting that this was the case, that Derwent Gardens and all the parts that were in Matlock Bath were subject of Heritage Lottery scheme in the 1990s are badly in need of renovation and some upgrading. So I agree with what she says, that should have been specified in the more detailed document as a priority for improvement. Obviously I can see that there's a need of in Matlock, Hawleys Park and other parks for quite a few improvements. But I would ask the question, what kind of improvements are going to be made? Are officers going to take note of suggestions from ward members, and are ward members going to be consulted about any proposals that come forward? That's something that I'm quite concerned about. Moving on to Councillor Wayne, who I also agree with in terms of air quality mitigation. I agree with the proposed wording, but obviously recognise that this council would have to urge the county council, or work with the county council, to try and reduce the effects of air pollution in towns like Ashbourne, and also in Matlock as well, where there are quite serious situations now, and they'll be far worse in the future with increased building and housing construction in the town, and obviously more traffic in Crown Square. and Dale Road probably as well. Another point I want to make was, I've said it this before as well, I would have preferred, rather than climate change strategy, to the action plan. I think Councillor O'Brien mooted that point earlier, or last week I think it was, and I think that's something that would have been an improvement, but I don't think it necessarily holds up the progress of the corporate plan as far as I'm concerned. But I think the public would prefer to see an action plan. I don't think, but I think as councillors we see too many strategies both in county and district councils, and I think an action plan is more straightforward, more easily understood by the public, and something which is very clear as to what its objectives are, whereas strategy is really a policy, I suppose. Action plan is far more direct. I think also, in terms of promoting greater recycling of food waste in the place column, I think, as I've said before, that must include home composting as well. I don't think we want to necessarily collect food bins every week from the public from the collection points. I think home composting can reduce that impact considerably, even though we're going to be forced to collect little green bins, caddies every week. I think home composting actually saves the planet quite a lot of effort, and certainly saves peat, in fact, in terms of people using home compost on their gardens. And finally, under the people column, engage with community groups and encourage projects run by community groups. I think that needs to be taken very, very seriously. I think when community groups make bids to carry out schemes, I think they've got to be taken far more seriously, and I think officers need to engage with them more directly.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Raw.
Thank you, Chair. My first comment is in response to Mr Purdy's introduction, where he's put, we are of course constrained in our ambition by the budget. The budget is set by a national government that is led by the same party as this council, and I think that needs putting on record that we're in the position we are in, and we make the choices we are making because of national decisions about our funding that do not meet the needs of local people. I'm disappointed that at the meeting that we had where we discussed the council plan, we discussed and I put forward the idea of well-being being put at some point into the plan. That's particularly important now. We've got a national crisis with regards to coronavirus, and we need to make sure that well-being is at the heart of what we do. I don't think people are that bothered about us being easy or fast. I think one of the key issues for local people is that they are kept well. My key concern in terms of the document at the moment is that we still have travellers referred to under prosperity under the 2020-21 plan. Travelling communities are people. We need to engage with them like other community groups, so that needs to be addressed. It's not appropriate to put this group of the community in a different label to other community groups. They need to come under the heading of people. Thank you.
Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to what Councillor Wayne's point, it's just a little concerning to hear that the Council feels it's somewhat impotent in terms of being able to implement any action in terms of the air quality. From what Mr Dobbs was saying at the start of the meeting, it would appear that there's a legal obligation potentially to put in an air quality action plan if the readings that we take show that is necessary, and the readings certainly do seem to be showing that's necessary and have done for some time. I understand what the officers are saying in terms of what we are limited in our power to implement things, but surely there must be something or some things that we can do. I know there's community groups in Ashbourne that have got ideas about what can be done to improve the traffic situation in Ashbourne. And it's a bit concerning just to hear that we just, well, yeah, okay, we just can't do anything about it. I think we need to look hard at that and try and come up with things we can do, even if it is just put in a real strong indication in there of making sure we work strongly with the county council to ensure that positive action is taken to implement an air quality action plan, because the people who know that area, people who know that road on Buxton Hill, residents live literally right next to the road. Lorries are on their pavement next to their front doors, and that pollution reading is right in their houses, and it's very concerning to think that we, according to the response that was given to Councillor Wayne, are impotent to do anything about that. So that was the point of that. And then just one other very brief point, just to clarify something, please, about the corporate plan. On page 10 of the agenda, it mentions, and I'm very pleased to see it mention, that there's going to be a refurbishment of the bandstand at Ashbourne Memorial Park, which is really good news, and I very much welcome that. But I was slightly concerned that on page 24, the bandstand, it says, is listed as a potential future liability that is not currently in the draft programme. So I just wanted to double check the commitment of the council to the refurbishment of the bandstand, because those two things seem a little bit contradictory to me. It made me not just understand the document properly, but just wanted to double check that, please.
Who can take that? Tim? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the air quality issue, the Council, if it does declare an air quality management area, will have a duty to form an action plan. Implementing the actions in the action plan is a different matter, and to me implementing the mitigation measures would mean taking those steps. It's unlikely that those steps will be taken by March 2021, bearing in mind that the steps would be at the behest of the County Council as they relate to traffic movements. But I would be happy to commit to producing an action plan by that time, certainly, but implementing the action plan will be another step beyond, and timescales will be set out in the action plan. In relation to the bandstand, we are working up a scheme for the renovation of the bandstand and other works in the park there in Ashbourne, and they'll be subject to a separate report for capital funding to the next meeting of Council, we hope, in May.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tony Morley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm speaking to the amendment, and normally my instinct would be to support that, but because the solution is out with our ability to do anything about it, we're dependent on county cooperating. Therefore, it would be sensible for us to flag up the problem rather than guarantee a solution, because believe you me, colleagues, if we are going to debate it, there is no surer way to alienate people than overpromise and underdeliver.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to suggest a slightly different set of words which might be acceptable, because it would allow the council to take action without actually saying that it's implementing. So my suggestion is that we act to implement any appropriate mitigation measures. Now, the action may be, as Mr. Braun says, to create a plan. It may be to approach the county council to discuss with them what they can do to mitigate the air quality issues, or it may be to act ourselves. But I think if we said to act to implement any appropriate mitigation measures, it would be something that we could do as a council. On one other point, going back to the improving facilities initially on Ashbourne Recreation Ground, which is just 2 points above that, I think when we were in our last meeting where we discussed the corporate plan informally, I think a number of councillors made the suggestion that the points on this flyer, on this central the central pull-out section, should be general points. And I've gone down the list, but I think the officers have done that in most cases. And there are three outstanding cases, two of them of which are concerned with particular developments and probably will require sufficient investment, and therefore probably should appear at this level. But improving facilities initially at Ashbourne Recreation Ground seems to be at a detailed level which is too low for a corporate plan. And I would suggest that we should be talking about parks and open spaces more generally, so improving facilities in parks and open spaces. And as other councillors have pointed out in this meeting, the service plan then repeats or puts more detail into what we would do to meet that objective. In terms of the service plan itself, then I would agree with Councillor Pauly that
but we should include all the parks and not just named a selection of parks. Thank you.
Councillor Sue Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just pick up specifically on the clean, green and safe? Developing a community tree planting programme. I'm just wondering who exactly is going to develop this. I think it's really important that as a council we encourage community groups and are seen as a council to be an enabler, and I really hope that any community group that comes forward with any plan, especially in terms of a tree planting programme, I do hope that we as a council can make it very straightforward for them and not put obstacles in their way.
Okay, thank you very much. Just going to ask Councillor Purdy to
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's a lot of points I've tried to scribble away, and hopefully I'll cover them all, but if I don't, please come back at me. It's a bit disappointing to hear all of these things coming in now, when we've said earlier on how much work's gone into this, and here we are on the night, and we're trying to change some wordings around it. But I'll progress it. I do accept, and I have to be with Tim, that to implement is out of our control. I'd like some words that's been suggested to encourage our authority to work with Derbyshire County Council, because it's their remit. So I do think we've got a bit of a problem there in following a recommendation that imposes something on County Council which is out of control. But it is incumbent upon us, of course, to encourage that. Air quality, again, that Tim has explained is coming through with consultants' recommendations, so I do see actions coming from that. That is also in the hands of the Climate Change Working Group. Councillor Mrs. Pawley, we did have a discussion, yes, about Matlock Bath, and I remember I said to you, well, if I'd have put Matlock Bath in, I'd have been accused of, as being the leader, taking over the reins, so I don't think that would be appropriate. If I can just say that when I was a district councillor some years ago, it was recognised that Jubilee Bridge was really in a bad state of repair. I didn't ask for it to be included in the corporate plan. I chased it through capital, and eventually we got the money done that way. So these issues are in the plans. And whilst there might not be headlines in here, I did explain at that Leeds Advisory Group meeting that a lot of the issues at Ashbourne have been running for some time now. And in the corporate plan, we have to make priorities. We have to prioritise as a chamber what are our top issues. And we have to tell you that the top issues are really serious at Ashbourne, the parks and the bandstand. That's not to say that there are other areas, of course, that need attention. Of course they do. And I'm happy if you want to put initially Ashbourne Park, and then the subsequent parks follow through. I've got no problem with that. But we've got to look at our priorities, and we've got to look at what budget monies are being put to this. So as we said earlier on, we can't afford everything, and Councillor Cliff said we can't achieve everything. Yes, there is an historical aspect to Matlock Bath, but there's lots of historical aspect to many other asset areas. So I just come back to the point on prioritisation. Councillor Raw, we're not the county council. Wellbeing is the remit of social services, and we have no officer here that has any remit to deal with the wellbeing. It should follow a golden thread, I agree, but it is the remit of that county council department. What else was there? Travellers. I remind you that they are classed in law as a separate species. They are classed as an ethnic group.
Point of order, Chair.
Please. Can you let Councillor Purdy finish, please? He hasn't finished. Please.
Point of order. Point of order.
What is the point of order, please?
The point of order is that you cannot refer to travellers as a species. It is absolutely
Okay. Well, thank you. Can you let
inappropriate.
Councillor Purdy finish his whole point, please? Thank you, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll remind myself of the Acton section, but I do know that they are classed as an ethnic group, if you want that word differently.
Thank you.
So they are people, and the inference that we're not liaising with them, I think we liaise with that group more than any other group in our district. Our officers are liaising with them daily. So I don't accept that we don't liaise with them. The bandstand, that's been touched upon. I can't think of any other point I've missed. Is there anybody else I've missed out on?
Okay, well, I've just got Councillor Swindle, he just raised his hand. Councillor Swindle.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put, it's getting quite heated over this corporate plan. I just wanted to put an independence perspective on it. I'm sorry that I could not make the workshops, the working groups on the corporate plan. It's just hard for me to get to these meetings with family commitments and so on. What I've seen before me here is a corporate plan that is damn sight better than what it was. And that is what members were calling for, and it is a lot better. I will go with the amendment if it still stands to change the word to implement as the speaker.
Sorry, there isn't an amendment.
There isn't an
amendment.
Okay, forget that. What I was going to say was, that word I accept, but I think what we're doing now is we're going through this with an incredibly fine tooth comb, and we're worrying about the definitions of words, and I'm referring to issues such as strategy and action plan. To me and any normal member of the public, the words pretty much mean that something is in place to deal with an issue, whether it's action plan or strategy. What I'm getting at is this is really, really good. And I'm sure if you put this before a lot of members of the public who aren't looking for final detail to pull it up, they would be happy with this. And what I'm saying is it could go on forever. And I think somebody in this room would not be happy with it. And I understand, Councillor Pauly, you always make excellent points, and I understand you're standing up for your ward. But we could go on, because I could start complaining about Elton Jubilee Field isn't mentioned in here. Windsor Recreation Field isn't mentioned here. There's a lot that isn't mentioned in here for villages. Yes, housing and so on, all ties into the villages and surrounding areas. We have to remember that a lot of us in here represent taxpayers who are pumping money into your wards and specific projects in those areas. But we don't sit and complain about it, because this benefits the district as a whole. And that is what we should be looking at. If I may, Chair, just very briefly, we look at achievements. I want to take this opportunity to pull out in there about the flooding, because my ward is actually mentioned there, Garley Bridge. And I'd like to say that that response to the flooding in November, and also very recently, was absolutely brilliant. And I've thanked Ash and his team by email, and I'd like to put it on record to say thank you to them, because although the villagers don't get a great deal, when we do shout up and we really need some help and attention, we do get it. And I'd like to say thank you very much on record.
Okay, thank you very much. We just need to agree, it's just a little bit, I've just had a chat with Sandra. Sandra, can I ask you to
Thanks, Chair.
clarify?
I think in the outset, Councillor Wayne may have mentioned an amendment. We certainly haven't treated it as one, because we asked for advice on the validity of the wording. And I think you've had from Tim quite clearly that the intended replacement may not be as simple as you thought. But I think what Councillor Purdy has now said is he's willing to look at alternative wording if we can come up with something. And I think Tim might hold the key here.
Thank you, Sandra. Sandra and I were trying to have a discreet email conversation there. I think it comes almost down to semantics, really, in terms of words, what we mean by mitigation. And we're fortunate now that the whole meeting's filmed and we can go back and see what it is we did mean. There is a defined legal process to go through in relation to air quality, and that's what we'll actually do as a council, because that's what our duty is. And that defined legal process requires us to produce an action plan. We don't know yet what's going to be in the action plan. For me, the words that we were looking to use to implement would mean to implement the action plan. And that's very difficult to set a timescale on, because if the action plan, for example, says build a bypass round Ashbourne, that isn't going to be by March next year. Okay? So I would be reluctant, and I would strongly recommend that you don't commit the council to something like that, because we won't achieve it. If what you're wanting to do is to define the creation of an action plan as a mitigation measure, and for me it's not really, it's something that sets out the mitigation measures, then that's something that we could perhaps commit to. The guidance suggests that an action plan takes between 12 and 18 months to develop after the declaration of an air quality management area. I wouldn't have thought that would be the case in the case of Ashbourne, where it's a relatively simple case. We know what the cause is, and to a large extent you know what kind of actions can be taken in relation to that. I would be happy to commit to agreeing an action plan by March 2021. But that isn't quite the same for me as implementing the actions that arise from it.
Councillor Burney, you happy?
I'm happy with that word, and I thank Tim for helping out to know that meets agreement with Councillor Wayne.
Okay. So,
yeah, that would be incorporated in the original proposition if everyone is happy that the original suggestion has been moved forward into something that doesn't bind another authority. And you would be voting on that premise that you accepted the addition of those words, the creation of an action plan by March 2021.
Okay, thank you very much for your clarity, Sandra. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Hands down. Okay, sorry, Keegan. Against. So hands down. Against, please. Abstentions. 1, 2. Thank you very much. Let's move on now to number 6. Councillor.
I'm sorry to intrude, but just before we do move on, I don't think we're quite bottom out any advancement of an amendment on this recreation ground issue, because I'm absolutely certain that Councillor Steve Flitter and his deputy will back up me and my deputy to say that within the Leaders Advisory Group, when this was discussed, we did advance the notion of a generalised statement there on recreation grounds. And I thought that that was being picked up and that would be included. So if it's a case of another amendment coming forward to change that wording, I'd be happy to put that forward.
It wasn't agreed at that meeting, Councillor Ratcliffe. It wasn't agreed. I mean, I'd have to go back to the notes.
Well, I thought it was. You see, this is one of the faults of not having recorded minutes.
I'm sorry. There were notes made. I don't have those notes to hand. If you remember, Deborah was taking notes. I'd have to refer back to those notes. Yes. But I go back to the earlier point. We can't go on with the shopping list, and I thank Councillor Swindle for his excellent
I agree entirely, and I make
comments.
The point that, you know, final decisions have to be made, but I did feel for the benefit of this meeting, there were two very distinct emerging elements of some debate. We've had a very good one on the air quality. I think we have had some significant discussion on the second point.
Sorry, Councillor Fitton.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that point, Chair. The words that I said was only a suggestion. We can't, at that leaders group, make recommendations. We can't make decisions. We can only make recommendations and suggestions. And that's what we did. Yeah. To me, I read in this debate that there was now a commitment to look at other parks as well as the market towns. Yeah. I'm quite happy with that.
Thank you.
But I understand where Councillor Hawley is coming from, because it's a very sensitive issue.
Yeah.
Right, I think we've done things. You know, we've got a long agenda, ladies and gentlemen. I think we need to move on. Okay, thank you. Can we go on to...
Sorry, can we go on to item 6, Service Plans 2020-21? Steve again, please. Thank you.
Chairman, yes, so this is a natural follow-on. These service plans include not only the targets from the corporate plan of which you've just discussed, but it also includes all the operational day-to-day work of the district council, which takes up most of the time and most of the energy of most of the staff here. It's the business as usual work, and this is what sets out in quite a lot of gory detail over the 100 pages appended what you all got. It's presented here tonight because it's what the budget is based on, and yeah, I'm delighted that all my colleagues, heads of service here to answer any detailed questions that members may have. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bull.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, obviously after the big debate upon the corporate, and as Mr Capes has just said, that the service plan now is getting down to doing it. We've done all the talk, now it's time to get our feet on the ground and start doing the work. And obviously it is a long plan, as we've all seen, and there are lots of issues in there, but I think we've got to get started on it, and I think once we do start, I think we will see a benefit from it. So with that, I propose that we go with officer's recommendation to accept this as service plan.
Councillor Frogger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I quite agree with everything Councillor Ball said, so I'm happy to second the motion.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, well, it's just been said, Chair, the service plans do run on from the corporate plan, and I can't see a lot of difference there that would upset anybody. Might be one or two questions, but I think it's followed through quite well. Well, I've got just 3 small questions on the service plans, and these are really, if I'm truthful, are for my own benefit because of interest here. But first one, it comes under community, and it's under events. And when you, well, the question I was wanting to ask is, do you or how do you treat staff time when costing out events for a service plan? Under community development, by July you're hoping to be working with the community payback scheme, which I've got some future interest in. But have any schemes been already discussed? And are we aware of some of the restrictions that are placed on local authorities to employ these, or well, it's not employment, they don't get paid, but to use the community payback? And under environmental health, this is a strange one for me. I note on item 4, under environmental health, you object to improve standards in the private rented sector. This is something I feel quite strongly about, and that we should be able to tackle. It's even more important than bringing homes into reuse. But I hope that includes people like HMOs, which I don't see in the report. And that's the one thing that I don't see mentioned in the service performance, is how we're going to treat standards in the private rented section. But a question that I also ask is that I am also concerned about housing standards with housing associations. And I got a strange phone call this week from a lady that was told from a local housing association that they no longer do housing allocations, but they were to contact the district council. I'm just wondering if that's true or whether I've got the wrong end of the stick.
Steve, can you answer those, please?
I'm going to defer to Ash for the first 2.
Oh, right. Okay, Ash. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With the first point regarding community events, Councillor Fletcher, the allocation of salaries or wages will be split between the two. We have 2 officers within the team who are salaried officers who deal with events that we operate and we deliver, but also they work with community groups and other organisations who wish to put on events. It is not the entirety of their job, but it is a part of their job, so they're salaried, and that's within the budget that you'll see later. In terms of something like the Cowshed Festival or Matlock Bath Illuminations, any staff in addition who are essentially working on those events, those wages are factored into the overall cost of operating and delivering that event. Excuse me.
The housing question, Rob, I think.
That one's me.
Tim,
Private rented sector housing falls under the auspices of Environmental Health Regulatory Authority for private sector housing standards. So in terms of making sure that properties come up to the standards required of the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, which Councillor Flitter might remember a very long answer I gave him many years ago when it was introduced, it's them that do that work. It is a reactive service. Over the years, it's shrunk from what it was when we had a landlord accreditation scheme and so on, and it relies on members of the public bringing matters to the attention of the environmental health team for them to investigate. That's the way it is at the moment. Together with Rob, we're looking at ways that we can make that service more proactive over time. There isn't an indicator in there specifically for it because some years ago we made the decision as a council to reduce the number of performance indicators that we reported on and to slim down the whole side of things because it's a reactive service and it's not something we control through a proactive programme of inspections. It's difficult to give a target figure for inspections that we could stick to. We're in the hands of those who bring it to our attention. As far as houses in multiple occupation go, we've got 2 licensed houses in multiple occupation in the district, which is obviously a very small number as compared to many others. Those properties are licensed, the licence lasts for 5 years and they receive inspections throughout the lifetime of those licences. They are, our 2 houses in multiple occupation are both private rented sector properties, so do receive the same attention that they require. They're also covered by a separate set of regulations. I won't do the same long answer, Councillor Flitter, but they're covered by a separate set of regulations relating to their management, so we deal with those as well.
Okay, Ash wanted to say something else.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back on your point regarding the community payback scheme, we are hoping to bring a report in the next month or so to members to put forward a proposal on the introduction of the community payback scheme. We have looked at a number of different models. We spoke to other authorities who have introduced them and tried to understand what they've learned from that. But there are some decisions for members to make in terms of how they would like it to be shaped and the risks that are associated to that.
Thank you. Okay, Rob. Yes, I'd be keen to know more about that particular case, perhaps outside the meeting, but in general terms, we work together closely with the Housing Association. Some use home options more than others in terms of drawing up a short list and making allocations, and my team assists that process, both assisting the applicant and the Housing Association. So there may just be a miscommunication issue there, but I'm happy to look into that in more detail. Okay, Councillor Raw, please.
Thank you. I'd like to request an amendment overall to the document that we replace the word prosperity with well-being. I'll explain why. Under the corporate performance indicators, we mentioned several areas that we want to support that are affected by people's well-being, and by promoting these things and encouraging people to have better employment opportunities and supporting local businesses, we are increasing the opportunity of...
Chair, point of order. Sorry, we've moved on from the corporate plan, which I think Councillor was talking about.
Yeah, we're on service plans, item 6 now.
Yeah, I realise
and on the
that.
delivery of the corporate plan, which Steve has explained.
Just relating it to... Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of general comments, if you will. First of all, I think there's much to be welcomed in the service plans. To be a little parochial to begin with, I do welcome the development of employment land at Cromford, Middleton Road in Wiltshire. I think that would be a great benefit, not only for general employment, but perhaps hopefully aid the local economy and indeed add to the income of this district council. The second point I picked up on was the intention to review the local plan. That seems to me very opportune, and circumstances are such at this moment. I think we should be turning our attention towards revising and reviewing that. How much strategic flexibility we might have when we turn our attention to it, I'm not sure, given the government policy changes that are hovering around. For example, in housing, and affordable housing in particular. My second comment refers essentially to paragraph 2.2 in the report and the statements that elements of the service plans and the performance there will be monitored and mitigation measures put in place to rectify poor and underperformance. Well, of course, this links in with the whole notion that the whole service delivery, of course, it is underpinned by our resources and finance potential. But it's good to know that we will monitor and take steps towards seeing that our achievements are met. The one thing I would just point out is, of course, that we certainly shouldn't neglect or overlook specific financing for climate change. It does seem to me throughout the whole agenda this evening, there's a little bit of, dare I say, sidelining of climate change, and I would have hoped it might have a little bit more prominence, though I do appreciate that it is something that we've accepted, underpins and is an integral part of everything we do as a council.
Councillor Martin Burford.
Thank you, Jane. Well, first of all, I'd like to endorse what Councillor Baxter just said about climate change. I agree with you entirely on that. I have 4 questions. First of all, neighbourhoods, EV charging points are going to be provided at least one car point in each market town by next month. Can I ask, are we on target to provide those by next month? Now, secondly, community development of the community tree planting programme by April 21. How is that going to be done? Has it been started yet, and how is it going to be developed? Obviously, it's district-wide, so obviously it's quite a task, I suspect. Thirdly, clean and green, development and maintenance plans for green spaces and verges to encourage greater biodiversity. How is that going to be achieved? Because there's very little evidence of it in our parks and open spaces currently. And finally, regeneration and policy, initiate a development scheme for Bakewell Road site in Matlock, and co-investment by March 21. Now, you hear quite a bit about what's going on. In fact, I hear more at other meetings outside this council about Bakewell Road than I do as a ward member in Matlock. It's rather galling to me as a ward member and someone who's been involved in groups looking at the Bakewell Road site for the best part of 10 years, actually. We've come to a point where I thought there were bids for a cinema, for instance, and as a ward member, or we as ward members, have had not a word from councillors about that.
Okay, can Ash, please.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the EV programme, the answer is yes, we're on track. So hopefully they'll be complete within the next month or so. In terms of the biodiversity and verges, this is something that we're having to do in conjunction with Derbyshire County Council. I'm sure you can appreciate much of that is their land. So we have been working together with them to identify areas that we feel are appropriate, and they will review that, and we will start work on that as soon as we can. But it is something that officers have been keen to introduce. I know that a number of members have raised it with me and with other members of my team, but please be assured we are working towards it, but much of it is not our land. We need to understand, because it's a new process for us and it'll be a new approach, the best way back going back.
Thank you. Councillor Pawley, please.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Well, you won't be surprised I'm coming back to parks again. I'm looking at the appendix and draft service plans 2021, and on the first sheet after the title page, we have got place, keeping Derbyshire clean and green, invest capital resources in our main parks. So I'd like to find out how we specify what a main park is, what qualities it's got to have to be a main park. Is it just simply the fact it's in a market town? And secondly, we will achieve this by, and the last bullet point on that says improving facilities in baths, gardens, bakewell, blah, blah, blah. I think now that ought to read, if we're not going to accept that main parks includes the parks, the Lovers Walk and that are Derwent Gardens, that we ought to have that bullet point just saying improve facilities initially in Ashbourne Recreation Ground, because I think that's about all we can do in 2021, and I don't want that bullet point kept in about the other parks when we're not going to be doing anything about them apparently.
Okay, so who have I got next? Big one. Councillor Finesse.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a couple of things on the...
So you just turned it off? Oh, it's on, it's been on.
Anyway. Yeah, a couple of things on here which I would have spotted before if I'd read it completely thoroughly. It's a bit late, but there's a couple of things which are talking about targets for October 2018 and March 2018. I assume they will be 2020. One is clean and green, it's 8 cuts by October 2018, and the other one is WN4, waste and recycling, which talks about 100 increase in residents recycling to March 2018, so I presume that should be 2020, shouldn't it?
Chair, some of them are backward-looking targets that are reporting on previous years, I think that might be what you're looking at.
Yeah, okay. The other thing I'd just like to mention is on performance, service performance. And for Bradlaugh, which is my ward, we've got 12 and 4, and we're very grateful for the work that Rob has done and the team, working with the Bradlaugh CLT, which I'm the director of, and the Housing Association. The 12 is actually purchasing 12 existing houses, completely tenanted, to save them from possible eviction. And that's been very effective, and the tenants are very grateful for that. And the other one is a conversion of a building to provide 4 possible one-bed flats, which are in great need in the village. We've got a waiting list of 11. So just to say, in performance, it is very good, lots of flexibility, and it's working well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been moved and seconded.
Can I ask a point of information, please?
Okay, quickly. Because you've had I'm trying to give everyone a fair crack at the whip, and you've got one on the agenda tonight.
You always do that, Chair, but I just want to ask a point of information. If you wanted something changed in the appendix, and we're approving the appendix, but you want something changed, how do you go about doing that? I'm sorry, I've never had to try to do this before, so I'd like some information.
Alessandra.
Okay, so the complete service plans are set out in Appendix 1.
Yeah.
And the motion is to approve those. So if your suggestion is minor, then you could be improving it. You could say, I move an amendment subject to the amendment of replacement of words X with Y. What is it you're trying to achieve, Councillor Corley?
Well, I really feel now that as this says initially, that part is the one we're going to do, and it can't be, nothing else can be done. Initially, that park in Ashbourne is the one we're concentrating on for 2021, and these service plans are for 2021. Then we ought not have that bullet point in saying improve facilities in Bath Gardens, Bakewell. I think it should just say improving facilities initially in Ashbourne Recreation Ground.
Otherwise it's contradictory.
It's contradictory. It's not what we've got in our corporate plan for this year.
So the amendment would be that the service plans 2021 as set in Appendix 1, guarded R, be approved subject to the revision of wording in that particular performance indicator to mirror that of the corporate plan. That doesn't negate the motion, it's the addition and deletion of words, and it does ensure consistency.
Yes, that is what I would like. Yes.
Yeah, that would be a valid amendment, Chair, if you're happy to accept it.
Are you happy to propose it?
I am very happy to propose it.
Have you got a second?
Yeah.
Right. Councillor Bull will second it, okay. So we're now...
Thank you, Chair, because
it's you proposed the whole motion,
I'm
haven't
going
you?
to say, I
so
actually proposed
do
my own motion, and I can understand the point that is being made, that this is the service of actually doing this within this timescale, and yes, the point on there is not quite so. So if we omit that and just put down to the one particular area that we have I highlighted in the corporate plan to be done in the first 2021, then I'm quite happy with that and the amendment as proposed.
So I need the seconder, Councillor Froggatt, to agree that as well. No?
Yes, Chair, if I could just come back, if the original proposer is happy to incorporate that within their proposition, it doesn't need to be an amendment if the seconder agrees with you. Okay.
Yeah, and Councillor Froggatt does. Okay.
Well, it's included
so
in
we've
the
got
original
that included with that small amendment.
Could I just thank Councillor Paul and Councillor Froggatt for that? Thank you.
Chair, before we go to the vote, can I get an answer to my question concerning the Baker Road did not consume a laptop? I didn't get an answer to that.
Oh, Steve.
Chair, I can quickly do that. The Bakewell Road scheme last went to members in November at the Commercial Board. Since when the proposal was to go out for expressions of interest, we're waiting for those detailed expressions to come back, and when they do, we'll come back to members at the Commercial Board. So we're in a bit of a sort of waiting for things to happen stage at the moment, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Can I ask all members, if there are specific questions like that, please email them into the offices before these meetings so that we don't get sidetracked on some of these specific things. They're all there for the officers to help us, okay? Right, so it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
I think that's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the capital programme. Item 7, Karen, please.
Thank you, Chair. The capital programme is the Council's plan for future spending on things such as buying and enhancing land, buildings, vehicles and equipment, or in giving capital grants to be spent on such things. In this report, we're asking members to approve the revised capital programme from 2019-20 to 2023-24, as shown in Appendix 1, and the list of potential future liabilities in Appendix 2. So the proposed capital programme is set out in Appendix 1, but it's very much an interim programme. It will be reviewed and updated in the coming months to reflect the new corporate plan priorities. As they've only recently, just now, been agreed, we couldn't put such new projects in the capital programme before now. Paragraph 1.1.3 sets out some examples of the type of scheme that officers are considering for inclusion in the capital programme that we brought back in May or June. The capital programme that's presented tonight for your approval includes 5 new capital schemes totalling £751,500. These are set out in paragraph 2, as well as the inclusion of the cost of replacing waste vehicles for the new contract. That cost £3.6 million, which was approved by the Council in December. Other changes in the programme reflect slippage, those are highlighted in yellow in the appendix, and changes to costings are shown in green in the appendix. I'd also like to draw members' attention to Appendix 2, which shows the list of potential future liabilities that haven't yet been included in the capital programme. That's generally because officers haven't yet worked up a business case, or we don't have a definite idea of costing. These total £725,500, but this doesn't include the potential cost of a traveller site, works at Lovers Walk, Matlock Bath, works at Station House, Matlock, and the redevelopment scheme at Bakewell Road, Matlock. Paragraph 1.62 of the report explains that after having financed the capital programme that's proposed in Appendix 1, and including the potential liabilities in Appendix 2, we would only have reserves and capital receipts left that total £600,000. So that doesn't leave us a lot to provide for the uncosted items in Appendix 2 and anything else that might arise from unforeseen events or from additional spending on current projects. The Council would, however, have the ability to borrow for future capital spending, providing that such repayments were affordable to the revenue budget. Overall, for a small district council, a capital programme of £13 million can be seen as fairly healthy, and I'd ask members to approve the recommendations set out in the report. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to embarrass you, Karen, don't worry, but I think it's very important for all of us to contribute to Karen. It's might be called Karen's Night, but it's been an awful lot of hard work for Karen, because leading up to this, I need to remind you, please members, that Karen lost Mark Nash. So an awful lot of weight has fallen on Karen's shoulders, and I want to thank you. Know we've lost a lot of sleep over this, Karen. And as I said in my leader's announcement, we're not out of the woods yet, and we need to be financially prudent, and that's the last message that Karen's just given us. And of course, what we need to do as leaders, and I did, Councillor Swabson and Councillor Atkin did, at a conference last weekend, we tackled ministers face to face and the Prime Minister, and we laid on the line that we need to know future spending plans. We can't work year to year. You don't do it at home, we need to forward plan. So I just say to you members that we did give them a very good talking to about the need to help Karen out and all financial officers throughout the country, so that this authority, other authorities can go forward plan. So I move the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to say a lot because I know there'll be questions on individual items here, but I would just like to again give thanks to the Council for the work they've done with the First Farm Social Club. It's a lot of money for an area to absorb in a new facility that has gone downhill in previous years, but it will revitalise the whole area, and that's very important. A lot of people there will feel the benefit from far and wide. My only real question on one of the items is on Harrison Way, where you are going to resurface the whole of Harrison Way. Is that a total cost, or is that a shared cost? Because there are many other people that use Harrison Way, such as Pete Rail and such as the County Council's refuse, well, it's not called a refuse centre now, is it? It's a recycling centre. Let's get it right. But do we have to repair that at our cost? That's what I'm really asking. And I think Karen highlighted the point, because on 2.2 it highlights the danger of not achieving the full potential of future capital income, and how realistic. I mean, I hope that in future items on this agenda, in the financial plans, we've really covered that. But how much of a real threat is that? Because I know that by 23-24 we'll only have about 417,000 for a capital programme if that isn't achieved. So I am a bit concerned about that, but yes, I'll echo your points. I was going to do in the next item. It's all well done to Karen, and thank God she's doing the job the way she is.
Sorry, are you seconding the motion?
I will second it,
Thank you.
yes.
Karen, do you want to answer any of this? Well, Tim had the detail.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in relation to Harrison Way, the road concerned is not the road down, but the tarmac road down to the roundabout. It's the track that leads from the roundabout to Peak Rail. That lands in our ownership, and under the terms of the lease, it's our responsibility to maintain it. It is in a terrible condition, and along with the Ashbourne works, that will be subject to a report to Council for approval at a later date.
To Peak Rail? Oh.
It's the road to Peak Rail, yes.
Yeah.
They lease the land from us, and it's our responsibility to maintain it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just echo all the comments that have been made about Karen and the finance team. I think we place a great deal of justified faith in her and her department in providing the finance to permit any capital spending and preventing us, obviously, from going into overspending. But, you know, essentially, forgive me if I'm being critical or downbeat, this is a fairly basic capital programme, because the funds that we have at our to hand really only permit very limited creative council aspirations, and indeed in the future they will be even more curtailed. I'm very struck by paragraph 1.62, and I still have some anxieties which I raised before about items in future liability programmes where the cost is still to be determined. It seems to me that, for example, if things were taken to the limit, for instance, on the amounts that we have available and take out the 722,000 from the 1.35 million at our disposal, the remaining could easily be eaten up or more by those three items in Appendix 2, not least of which is, of course, the traveller site development. So I'm assuming that we're sort of underpinning our thoughts of completing this by the fact that we have reserves at our disposal. But of course, as Karen rightly points out elsewhere, reserves, once they're gone, either you have to replace them or they dwindle away to nothing.
Karen?
I think it would be useful for you to look at the report later on the agenda about the capital strategy, because that shows the different sources of funding that are available to the council. Reserves and capital receipts are not the only sources of funding. As I mentioned, we do have the ability to borrow as long as we can afford the repayments. But there's also things like capital grants, Section 106 agreements, and they're funding a lot of the current capital programme.
Oh, okay. If I can very quickly just return back then, if I may, on that point, because I don't think it's been raised before. I may be wrong there, but I'm suggesting that the traveller's site could be supplemented by external grants or funding.
If grants are available for any project, we would look into that, yes.
So what would be available for that?
Yes, Chair. So Homes England have part of their grants programme to provide traveller sites. So there used to be, there was previously a defined grant, and it got merged with all grants for housing, affordable housing development, because it is a form of affordable housing.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 points, three questions really in Appendix 1, which starts on page 22 of the agenda. The first is about the Matlock Asker Lane social housing grant. Is this for the affordable housing on treetops? The second is to do with the Harrison Arms House charity, £25,000. I was wondering what that was. And the third is to do with the pay and display ticket machines. This is probably more a concern because the pay and display ticket machines still do not seem to be working with to provide card payments. And I think this is a drain on council revenue that is probably becoming material. Thank you.
Rob.
Chair, so the two grants you mentioned there, the Asker Lane scheme, previously we brought a report to Council which outlined the scale of demand for Section 106 schemes in the district, and in order to help housing associations finance the purchase of homes in the district, there are 25 sites with over 400 units of Section 106 homes that we need them to buy. That comes out at about £27 million. So we've been using some of our Section 106 income we get from other sites to fund the purchase of those schemes through housing associations. In terms of the Harrison, the Arms House scheme you mentioned in Matlock, we've been working with the Arms House charity. They have an empty property which is in their ownership, and we are helping them bring it back into use to provide an affordable housing unit for local people.
Thank you. Councillor Martin goes first.
Sorry, about the...
Oh, you got no, sorry.
About the...
beg your pardon, sorry. I'm running ahead of myself. Ash, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. The money that's noted in Appendix 1, Councillor Hughes, is to finalise the rollout of the new pay and display machines in the car parks. And regarding your point that they're not working in terms of the contactless payment, that's not to do with the actual system, that's to do with signal strength. Work is being done now on the machines. We are seeing some improvement, not to the level that we would want at this stage, but that work is ongoing. But we are seeing improvement across the district.
Abby? Thank you. Councillor Martin Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've just got 2 points to make actually. One thing I welcome is the allocation of £30,000 to resurfacing footpaths at Dimple playing fields, something I've been lobbying often about for the past 5 years. So I welcome that. It is an example, unfortunately, of the neglect of the fabric of our parks and playing fields. In this particular case, it's so close, of course, to our flagship leisure centre, the Ark. And I think it's laughable in a way, or certainly ironic, that the paths are in such an appalling state that so few people who actually go to the Ark for their keep fit and swimming regime actually walk there. They drive probably 2 miles from parts of Matlock, from the car parks there, and then drive all the way back again, adding to congestion and so on, and pollution. And if the paths were in a decent standard, then they could use those. But I mean, at the moment, certainly when we've had this wet weather recently, people are forced to go in Wellingtons to use many of the paths. So I think any researching there has to be in conjunction with drainage works. I think this is something that's always neglected by local authorities. They put money into researching roads and paths and so on, and don't think about the underlying problem, which is drainage. And in All Saints Ward, we have got, certainly 2 of us have got a certain amount of expertise and experience in terms of drainage. So I think we'd like, again, as I've said before, to be consulted about anything that's proposed here, so that we can perhaps give our 2 pennies in terms of our experience. The second, which is a question really, CCTV for public convenience. Is that because there have been reported issues in our public conveniences? Or what? I mean, I just wonder what the reason for it is.
Ash.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have had some instances of vandalism, and we believe that CCTV will help deter that confusion.
Councillor Fawley, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got 1 comment and 2 questions. First of all, I'm very glad to see that the money's being put on one side for restoration of the war memorials in Cromford. That's the comment. The questions, I'm still a little bit hazy about what goes under the capital programme and what doesn't. I can't see anything here about the restoration of the 17th century, 18th century shelter that's on Lovers Walk that's been taken out by a tree recently. I don't know if that's capital programme or reserves. I'd like to know if that's being included anywhere. I've been told by Mike Galsworthy it will be rebuilt, but I can't see any money in here for it. The second question I've got is about the detailed inspection of the cliff faces. Now, I know that it must be about 2 years, I think, before we're due for the review of that, for this detailed inspection to take place. I think it was 5 years after the huge rockfalls that happened before. But with the changing weather patterns that we've had since last October, we had 3 huge trees come down on that bank, and one which took out that shelter was enormous. And I'm really concerned that I've been told that the clean team keep an eye on it. Clean and green team, sorry about that, keep an eye on the surfaces as they go past. Well, they can't possibly climb up there and have a look at all the rock faces, and I just want a bit of assurance that waiting another 2 years is going to be all right, really. Should we be thinking about it?
Tim, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, in relation to the rock faces, we are starting some of the work in relation to that at the moment, Councillor Mrs. Pawley. We're doing some work with consultants getting prices off them in relation to an area of the cliff face that extends round into Matlock, and then we'll be looking at Matlock Path. The work that the Rangers do is mainly to record whether there have been rockfalls in the vicinity so that we can see if there's an ongoing and obvious problem. They're not technical experts, as you rightly point out,
but they can give us some useful information that can point out whether there is a problem and where that problem might be, and how we might address it. The trees, as you know, are not necessarily related to the rock face as such, but it could be related to the weather we've been having, the amount of rainfall that we've had, and root failure, and we're keeping an eye on that as well. But in terms of the rock face, yes, we'll be coming back to this with a scheme around that at some point in the near future.
Sorry about the shelter.
Oh, the shelter. Yes. Shelter, I forgot that one, so I don't know the answer. I'll ask Mike about that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Superford.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just talk about the social housing grant? Obviously, this agenda is public knowledge, and in fact we're being recorded. So I've asked before about Matlock YMCA, and I would also just mention Ashbourne NCHA 12 bungalows. My colleague here doesn't know where they are in Ashbourne, and we certainly don't know where they are in Matlock. Are we going to be given that information in the near future, or do we just have to wait for a planning application?
Rob, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, in relation to the Ashbourne bungalow scheme, that was the site that was withdrawn by the developer, the landowner in question. I know it was a site that several members were very keen on, but the landowner couldn't agree a deal with the housing association. So unfortunately, we've actually pulled that scheme from the scheme altogether. In terms of the Matlock YMCA, the site owner is still deliberating, I think, on the offer that's been put to them. It is a difficult site, and it's one that we would, of course, consult with ward members as the scheme progressed, when we've got more to say. But at the moment, the negotiations are still going on between the housing association and the landowner.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, it's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen. And Karen, once again, the revenue budget, please. Item 8, 2020-21.
Thank you, Chair. So this report covers the revenue budget. Revenue spending relates to spending on day-to-day running costs incurred by the council on things such as salaries, payments to contractors for services such as waste collection, interest on loans, and we net off that income from fees and charges, government grants, council tax and business rates. The council has a statutory duty to set a balanced budget. Section 1 of the report describes the processes for preparing the revenue budget, and the revenue budget, as you've heard, is linked to the corporate plan priorities and the service plans that you approved earlier in the meeting. Section 2 of the report sets out the details of the local government finance settlement that the council received recently for 2020-21. The national context is set out in paragraph 2.2 of the report, with the local context explained in paragraph 2.3. To pick up on a couple of the local points, the settlement funding assessment, which is our main source of income from the government, was increased by 1.6% for 2021, and this is an increase of £315,000 more than we assumed in our medium-term plan, mainly as a result of the government withdrawing the negative revenue support grants that we thought might happen. The table in paragraph 2.3 shows the council's core spending power, as calculated by the government, should increase by 3.9%, but that does assume that the council will increase its council tax by £5 per banding 30. There are other increases in grants mentioned in the report, such as in the New Homes Bonus and Rural Services Delivery Grant. As the report states in paragraph 2.5, the settlement for 2021 is much higher than anticipated in our medium-term financial plan. But members will recall that we had a lot of additional expenditure relating from the new waste contract, so most of the increase was taken up by that. A lot of the financial uncertainties for future years still remain, so while this helps us to balance the budget for 2021 and put some aside in the reserve to address corporate plan priorities, there are still some uncertainties. Section 3 of the report shows the proposed budget and council tax requirement for 2020-21. The table in paragraph 3.1 shows the district council element of the council tax requirement, excluding parish precepts, has increased by £341,000. And the reasons for the change are set out in Appendix 3, and the significant variances are shown in paragraph 3.2. The most significant variance relates to the additional cost of the new waste contract and the use of reserves. Section 4 of the report shows the council tax requirement and the proposed increase in the council tax, which is recommended at £5 per bandee, which works out at 2.39% for the district council's part of the council tax. That's within the referendum principles set out by the Ministry for Housing, Culture and Local Government. Housing Communities and Local Government. Section 5 of the report deals with the medium-term financial plan. So this shows our forecast for spending over the next 4 financial years. So while it reflects known and current requirements, it can't be conclusive as changes are bound to take place over time. But it does show an indication that we'll need to save around £250,000 a year by 2023-24. Section 6 of the report addresses reserves and balances, and forecast balances are shown in Appendix 6. Section 7 explains the proposed approach to achieving the savings set out in the medium-term financial plan, and the approach is dealt with further in the medium-term financial strategy report, which is later on the Council's agenda. One of the most important parts of the report is Section 8, the Chief Finance Officer's statutory report. So in that part of the report, I have to tell members my views on the robustness of the estimates made in calculating the budget and the adequacy of proposed financial reserves. I'm satisfied that the estimates are robust and that the proposed reserves are adequate. The review of adequacy of reserves is shown in detail in Appendix 7, and I've also used SICLA's Financial Resilience Index as explained in the report. Section 9 of the report shows the town and parish council precepts. These have to be shown as part of the district council requirements, although we have no control over them. Section 10 of the report sets out the consultation that's taken place. Since writing the report, no further responses have been received, so we only have the 2 objections to the council tax increase. I ask members to approve the report recommendations, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Bull.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, again, I'd like to thank Karen for all of this. This number crunching is very, very difficult, and for us that just sit here and we have to read it, and rather than putting it together, it is quite difficult at the best of times when I wouldn't like Karen's job for anything. I think she's been very prudent in what she stated. She's made comments to say that what she feels is what we're putting in place are worthy of being, and as she stated, we have to balance the books. And at the moment, with our internal and external auditors, as we all know at previous meetings, they have recommended and stated that we are in a good position, and our finance officer is doing the right job and keeping it. So with that, I would like to propose this as read.
Okay, Councillor Atkin, you matter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to echo all the hard work that Karen and the team do in setting this, and I'll second the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flitter, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, local government finance is a very misunderstood affair, because it is so detailed, so difficult to understand. But I have to thank Karen and her team, and we can't really express how much we do appreciate the help that we get from our finance team. This report that's in front of you tonight is very comprehensive, but it's also very readable. I don't say it's understandable, but it is very readable. And for those of us that have been around a little bit longer, do understand some of it, but local government finance, as I said, keeps changing all the time. And when we had our group meeting last night, and we ran through this, the comment came to me was, what would we do without her? And that's very relevant, because I think she's held this council on the straight and narrow for many years, and we really do appreciate it. However, I do have one question on recommendation 6, and I'd just like clarification on this, because it does state on number 6 that we have to continue a programme to identify efficient savings for an additional income of 250,000 by 23-24. I'm wondering whether that wording additional should be annual, because further in the report it does state that we have to save 250,000 every year from now until 23-24. So that wording on that may not be quite right. It gives a different inference, and I'd like a comment on that, please, if you would. If we look at the national context of the settlement that we've got, yes, we could sit here all night talking politics. We could sit here all night talking about the uncertainties of Brexit. And we could sit here all night talking about government formulas on funding. But really, it doesn't get us anywhere, does it? We are where we are, so therefore we look at the local context. And the settlement is, for us, better than expected. And as Councillor Purdy said, it does give us that respite for a few years, or a short period of time. And as Karen pointed out, it gives us the opportunity to plan savings, and I think that also gives us an opportunity to create further investment possibilities. So I think we should look at those variations in spending and highlight some of the concerns that I do have. I'm not saying that I'm against them, but I'm saying I do have concerns. And the first one is the corporate director's post. And that for 101,000, to me, that's an obscene amount of money. But in local government terms, it isn't. And in professional terms, it isn't. But we have to look at the benefits. If we, whoever takes this job, we don't really understand the job description of this person yet. And I would like, at some stage, for more information on that, so I've got a better understanding of what this person is supposed to be doing. I hope that they'll be getting involved in the commercial activities, and if that post brings in £200,000-300,000 a year for the benefit of this council, then it's doing its job and it's going to be a good aspiration. If it doesn't, if it's somebody sat behind a desk, then that's going to be a different kettle of fish. So if anybody could really explain where those efforts are going to be put, I'd appreciate that. Then we talk about the waste contract. Well, we've all been through that many, many times, and that to me is just an uncontrollable private sector cost. Nothing we could do about that. We were told about it, but that, and we have to abide by it. That to me is not good outsourcing, but it's what we are left with. And it's same with benefits, revenue and benefits. That outsourcing again, but I know one contract is over, and we're starting a new contract with different setup. But I'm just wondering whether another expense of 51,000, whether that is an extra 51,000 on top of what we were paying previously, or is that the cost? I can't quite pick that up in the report. The other thing that I've got a little beef about is general repairs, and we're still looking at £41,000 worth of repairs that are hoping to get done. Now, that situation to me runs raw, because I remember, I'd really like more details about the maintenance plan, because I remember Spa Villas, 5 lovely Victorian houses in Matlock. The council compulsory purchased them, and they were left to rack and ruin, and then all we've got is a car park. Yes, it brings in a little bit of revenue, but it took 5 families out of that situation. We also remember in Matlock the toilets, the children's play area, which no work got done for 6 years of the plan being made for improvements, and now the town council are having to pick that up. I also remember this town hall. We've had a plan since 2014, and that's not been achieved yet. So, you know, we've got to get a lot stronger in looking after the properties that we are actually involved with. And then, of course, there's the issue of car parking. Well, in the plans that you've seen in front of you tonight, we know that the loss of 105,000 in car parking charges. Yes, we've had vandalism. Yes, we've had poor. But the costs are far too high. And if you're actually interested in economic regeneration for our local town centres, you have to start bringing down the car parking charges for visitors. We have a scheme in place for residents, and they can come down between 11 and 4 and do their, before 11 and after 4, and that's very valuable. That's something, by the way, that the Liberal Democrats brought in. And then, of course, you know, you need to look after your tourists, because many people, and people that walk around this area and take in our beautiful scenery, don't come and use our car parks because they're too expensive. So therefore, they're not coming into the town centres to spend the money. They're parking outside.
Okay, Councillor Fitty, can you sort of wrap up?
I will.
Lots of people to talk, please.
Yes, I will. And I said I'd be brief, and I will. Now you've just delayed me a few minutes here.
Well, please, I don't want to cut you off.
But you better let me have me say, please. And I just feel very strongly about our economic generation. And also, I'd just like to know, local plan, 150,000. And I know we've got consultants further down, but I'd like to know how much of that is actually spent on consultancy. Changing business rates, I can't do anything about it. The share of that has gone down. Karen has explained all that very well. But just to conclude, I do support the budget, and that's based on the fact that it's a £5 increase on a Band D property, which I don't believe is excessive, but that's based on the various activities and aspirations that we've got in the corporate plan. And that's where we've all got to have an input. We all have that input, that's what we want to achieve. If we don't agree this plan now, this revenue budget, we won't be able to achieve that. But let me just assure you, final word, Chair, let me just assure you that we will be monitoring these areas of concern, and we will come back to you if we don't see improvements.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, you're next.
It will be a lot shorter than that, promise.
Thank you.
It's one issue, the corporate director. I was a little bit surprised this was on, really, because as Councillor Witter said, we've seen no job description. How do we know someone's going to be paid £101,000 without knowing what they're going to be doing for that? And also, are we committing this as a long-term investment? Is this 101 just for the first year? Because if members are going to have input into the corporate director, one, I'd like to know what us to agree actually what he's going to do. Is he going to be involved in regeneration? Is he involved in commercialisation? Is he going to be on performance-related pay? Because I certainly want to some sort of,
I want a feedback from somebody in the council.
So I think Paul can answer that question for you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. If members recall, the reports are brought to Council on the 16th of January. That report sought the principle of incorporating the cost of that post into the budget for this very reason, in order that the Council could set a budget for the forthcoming year. The Council was also very clear, and I recommended in that report that I would come back to members with the details that have just been outlined by Councillor Flitter, in terms of the remit, the roles, the responsibilities, exactly what that role would deliver. And it is my intention to bring that report to Council on the 30th of April.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to, in some ways, repeat what Councillor Raw said, but what Councillor Gamble said, but I think I want to do some other things as well.
Okay.
The first is about the table on page 28 under section 3 of the agenda under section 3.1, and there's a the second line in that table says income from investment properties, and this is a nuance really, but are we only interested in commercial investment in property, or are we looking at other sorts of investment as well? Does the commercial board have a role in possibly developing new services that would earn an income, in which case the income should include the income from those services? It's just a nuance really. The report suggests that all we're interested in is property. Now going on to the corporate director, I really had, I think...
Have you got anything new to add to it?
Well, only that I'm wondering what I was going to ask what responsibilities will the corporate director have, but what responsibilities will he or she have associated with commercial investment? And what difference will this corporate director have? What difference will the corporate director make in terms of the outcome of those commercial developments, and say for the selection of projects and the outcome of those projects? Can I have some answers to those questions?
That will come on the 30th. That's the precise remit of the report that I will be bringing, Chair.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Karen, did you want to add anything?
I'm just going to add about the investment properties. So the income shown there is from 2 sites that we currently lease out. At the moment, the commercial board hasn't initiated any investment projects, but if they were to do so, then the income from those would be shown here in the report.
Councillor Radcliffe, please.
Thank you, Chair. I remember when my group was the main opposition, and we had these budget meetings. Councillor Lewis Rose always used to say across the table, how would you do things differently? Sort of prodding me to offer an alternative budget. My reply was always, well, it's not my, I'm not the majority party. It's not for me to actually set the budget. But I used to make comments as to the sort of ethos and thrust of what we might do differently. And I have to say that I think Councillor Flitter, as now the leader of the opposition group, has given a really strong and very good opposition statement. So I endorse the vast majority of what he has said, and particularly about car parking, of course, where he and I have for years been opposed to the increases that we've undertaken. But a couple of sort of general points, if I may. It does seem to me that throughout all the items that we have before us this evening, the golden thread, to use that phrase, has been of the need to make efficiency savings. And I think we'll have to constantly remind ourselves that the reason that we are in this position is due to the cumulative underfunding that local authorities have been faced with. I picked up a very interesting statistic recently that states that over the 10 years whilst this has been taking place, local authority spending power has been reduced by 70%. So it's not just the 45% capital receipts that we no longer have from central government, but in fact our spending power has been drastically cut. And one wonders too about the ongoing programme of efficiency savings, whether or not it's actually now brought us to a position where there will be a realistic prospect of future savings impacting on service delivery. So far it has been efficiency saving, but I begin to pick up in report comments that in fact we may well have to look at very realistic delivery cuts, as it were. If I could just close with a question to Karen, if I may. I was very interested in your comments in that paragraph on the new homes bonus, Karen, and the sentence that read, the government will reward local authorities where they are ambitious in delivering the homes we need. Well, it seems to me that Rob's extremely laudable council house programme is one that we should be rewarded for, and I just wonder whether we're likely to have any incentive financial as a result of that.
A bit you quoted is actually a quote of something that the minister said. So I think we're waiting for the consultation paper to come out to see exactly how the new scheme will work.
Yep. Councillor Rawl.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back on some points that have already been made about the corporate director post and get some clarification. We've talked in our corporate plan about engagement, and I just wonder if we ask the people that we're elected by if they would prefer £100,000 to be spent on trees or car parking spaces in our market town or a corporate director, which way they would vote. I would like a point of clarification on if we vote in favour of accepting this budget, are we voting to accept a corporate the corporate officer that's in there, the 101, or will that be open to further debate? Because I, for one, need to see the detail and consult and engage with the people that I am representative of on that decision. My second point in relation to the budget is the 2% increase in staff salaries. This has already been rejected by the unions. Have we got any contingencies in place in case the unions are successful and we can reward the very hard work
Excuse me,
our
Chair, point of order.
do?
What Councillor Raw is getting at is an increase in officers and employees of this council. We're not discussing that.
It's in the budget. The 2% is in the budget. I'm just asking if there's a contingency if a greater pay award is awarded.
I'm just going to ask Paul to answer the first point you had there.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Going back to the decision members made on the 16th of January, the very reason I brought that report was to raise this issue in response to the corporate pay challenge, which said that as a council you have a very ambitious agenda, but you've got next to no strategic capacity to deliver it. So if members want to deliver on an ambitious corporate plan, it is officers that assist this council in delivering it. And the corporate director post is one such resource, which not just I feel is needed, but members themselves with the peer challenge said was needed. So the very purpose why I brought that report in January was to make provision in this budget on the very clear assumptions I would come back to members with the detail. And that's the detail which I'm currently working on with CLT colleagues, and will come back to Council on the 30th of April. Members at that point can decide whether they wish to support that particular appointment or not. But for the purpose of setting a budget, you need to put the money in the budget if that improvement is going to be made within the forthcoming financial year.
Okay, thank you. Karen, you want to say something?
On the second point about the pay award, a budget is always a forecast. Like nearly every other council, we put 2% in our budget, and it has been projected this week. The usual contingency we have is the general reserve, which is there for just that sort of purpose.
Okay, Councillor Hawley, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to go to Appendix 3. We've talked about the reduction in car parking income in terms of having to put new machines in and maintenance. But could somebody tell me how much of that £105,000 is actually lost because people haven't been parking? How much, in other words, how much actual income have we lost because we've had a reduction in numbers? The second point I want to ask about is the reduction in public convenience charging income. I thought when we did the review, we were hoping that the whole thing would turn out so that we would not make a profit or not lose any money, and we seem to have lost £27,000 over very few public conveniences. I just wonder why that's happened.
Karen.
On the first one about car parking income, I don't have the figures to hand, and I'm not sure if we can even calculate what the reduction is by people not arriving. We can look at the fall in numbers parking there, but we'd have to provide you that later. I don't know if Ash wants to comment on that one.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very difficult, Councillor Paula, to say how many people aren't coming because of they don't agree with the fee structure. We know that if there's a downturn in visits, but that could be down to a number of different reasons. I think it's impossible to say what we don't know, if that makes sense.
I was just asking because I wondered if there was a trend, that was all.
Okay.
And on the final point regarding the public conveniences, we were due to bring a report to members on public conveniences, and following a full year of it being in place, so there'll be some information given to members in the next few months.
If I may add, the original budget was very much a guesstimate because we hadn't charged before.
Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to invite Councillors Splitter and Ratcliffe to sometime drive away from the Derbyshire Dales and experience car parks in other parts of the country. Because in terms of comparison, we are probably medium in the general cost of things. But to me it seems if we reduce car park charges, we'd be wasting an opportunity, because we provide residents with a car parking permit up till 11 and after 4. So that's lots of time to be able to use that car parking, but the rest of the time it means we're taking income from people who aren't residents of the Dales. We're supplementing our income from other sources. So why I would ask you, my main experience is with Bakewell. Try and get a car parking space any time of the day, any day of the week in Bakewell, and to say that's too expensive it just isn't true. Keep the car parking should be used to our advantage as a means to supplement the income of Derbyshire Dales, and the way it's set out, it's doing just that. Can I make a small point on public conveniences?
Well, if this is a revenue budget.
Well, it's just the reduction that the question was asked.
Very quickly, please.
It was just the state of the entries to the toilets. The people using them are going through in 2s and 3s while those fairly flimsy plastic doors are opening. Okay, just to point something.
Okay. If you see that, please email it in to Ash. Right, thank you very much. Okay, now this is a recorded vote, members, so we're going to have a recorded vote on this. It's been moved and seconded.
Yeah, I need the answer on item 6 clarifying.
Karen had your answer, and then we'll go to the recorded vote.
Yes, you're quite right. I think we need to change the recommendation 6 to add the word in year. Let me just remind myself. So it should read,
We'll incorporate that into the motion.
So it should read, to identify efficiency savings and or additional income of £250,000 a year, so we had a year,
Okay.
by 2020.
Move to second, happy. Thank you. Right, it's going to be a recorded vote. Jackie.
Councillor Archer.
Yeah, in favour, support.
Atkin.
For.
Wright.
For.
Buckler.
For.
Bull.
For.
Martin Barefoot.
For.
Sue Barefoot. Buckle.
For.
Chapman.
For.
Donnelly.
For.
Elliott.
For.
Fitzherbert.
For.
Flitter.
For.
Froggatt. Furness.
For.
Gamble. Hill. Hobson. Hughes.
For.
Lees.
For.
Tony Morley.
For.
Michelle Morley. Hawley. Purdy.
For.
Ratcliffe.
For.
Raw. Salt.
For.
Shirley.
For.
Statham.
For.
Sutton. Swindle. Wayne.
For.
Wakeman.
For.
Thank you very much, that's great. Moving on now to item 9, council tax assessing. Karen.
I can't got much to say about this one, you'll probably be pleased to know. It's a technical report that just follows up from the revenue budget and Derbyshire Dales council tax that you've just approved, and brings in the council taxes set by the major preceptors and town and parish councils. You might have noticed from the report, the outcome is an average increase in the council tax of 2.43% with the final bill, and that includes the average parish council. The empty homes premium that we introduced in 2019-20 will remain for 2021. The head of housing, Rob, and I plan to review the premium after the end of this first financial year and bring a report to a future council meeting.
Councillor Bull.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As Karen's just said, this is just a follow-on. We've already virtually agreed before. This is just a formality to making it a formal situation that it is being presented now to the public that we're doing the increase. So I propose the recommendations as start.
Councillor Bright.
I second that, Chair.
Okay, anyone else is to propose and seconded? All those in favour, please show. Sorry, it's a recorded vote. Sorry. So we're going to have to go through the same procedure. I beg your pardon, I've jumped the gun. Jackie.
Councillor Archer.
For.
Atkin.
For.
Wright.
For.
Buckler.
For.
Bull.
Yeah.
Martin Barefoot.
For.
Sue Barefoot. Buttle.
For.
Chapman.
For.
Donnelly.
For.
Elliott.
For.
Fitzherbert.
For.
Flitter.
For.
Froggatt. Furness.
For.
Gamble. Hill. Hobson. Hughes.
For.
Lees.
For.
Tony Morley.
For.
Michelle Morley. Hawley. Purdy.
For.
Ratcliffe.
For.
Raw. Salt.
For.
Shirley.
For.
Salem. Sutton.
For.
Swindle.
For.
Wayne.
For.
Wakeman.
For.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 10, medium-term financial strategy. Karen, please.
So this report seeks approval for the Council's medium-term financial strategy for the years 2020-21 to 2024-25. The strategy sets out the Council's strategic approach to the management of its finances, and it is intended to provide a framework within which decisions can be made about future service provision and council tax levels. I apologise that there's been some duplication in this report and the revenue budget report. Usually the medium-term financial strategy would be brought to members in the autumn so that we could set the strategy and the direction for the coming budget setting process. But we delayed the report this time, partly because we hadn't got the corporate plan priorities to align it with, and partly because we're waiting for the outcome of the local government finance settlement, which could have made a significant difference. The proposed medium-term financial strategy is shown in Appendix 1 to the report. It does state that there are a lot of uncertainties in the Council's finances going forward. I'm sure you've all heard of those from me before. The most significant ones are the two government reviews. The Fair Funding Review that looks at needs and resources of councils, and the proposed changes to the business rate retention system. Both of those could have a significant impact on our finances. The government say that they'll be issuing a consultation paper on the fair funding review shortly. As mentioned in the budget report that you've just considered, the medium-term financial plan indicates the council needs to save £250,000 a year by 2023-24. The key thing I'm asking in this report is that members approve the proposed approach to achieving those savings. This is set out in the medium-term financial strategy and in paragraph 2.6 of the report. Given the relatively low value of the savings target in terms of our gross expenditure, the amount we've got set aside in the general reserve and current and known requirements, I feel, and also the amount that we've got in strategic reserves, I feel that it's not appropriate to make large savings now, which we might find wouldn't be necessary when we get the outcome of those government reviews. So my recommended approach to meeting the corporate savings target and closing that £250,000 budget gap, which we don't need to do for a couple of years, is to retain from significant service reductions at the present time until the outcome of the government reviews is known. And I'll ask members to approve the report recommendations. I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Hobson.
Chair, I'm happy to move the report. I take note of what Karen said about the delay in presenting this, and I thank her for a very prudent approach. I'm sure we're all very grateful for her input.
Councillor Bright.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to second it. It's a very well prepared report, and with all the uncertainty that is around us at the moment, it's a very good report, so I'll second it.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is another very interesting report, and it's one where Karen gives sound financial advice. And if she's happy, then I'm happy with that. But I just want to hold account to 1.8 and 1.9 of the report. 1.8 refers to holding service reduction until the reviews are complete. And I'm looking at the underlining question there of how serious we think that is, and should that be for a discussion at the Leaders Advisory Group. And secondly, on 1.9, it states that the commercial board are tasked with streamlining. Now, I'm not too happy with how the commercial board has operated as such. It hasn't met my expectations as yet, but I think that's for another discussion, and I don't ever remember that the commercial board has ever been tasked with looking at streamlining services. And I wondered whether we could have a clarification and whether that, again, will come to the leaders group.
Karen, thank you.
On 1.8, I deliberately, on 1.8, I deliberately put a hold on the service reductions because I thought if sources of additional income or investment income come to light, we would obviously want to pursue those, but we wouldn't want to reduce services unnecessarily. For 1.9, the commercial board, I don't know if Paul wants to respond to that.
Paul, do you want to? Thank you.
Yes, Chairman, I will respond to that. Well, clearly when the commercial board was set up, agreed terms of reference were approved by members, and I agree with Councillor Flitter, we've not actually achieved the aspirations that we originally hoped, and there is a very much needed review of that commercial board to be undertaken in terms of what the aspirations of the council may be moving forward on the whole issue of the commercial agenda. And in terms of the reference to streamlining, it was really about trying to get value for money. So it was looking at how we currently deliver services, asking the question, are we the best placed organisation to deliver those services? Is there somebody else that could deliver them for us? or can we actually offer some of our services to others and generate an income stream from them? So there's a whole range of initiatives in terms of trying to get best value for public money in terms of service delivery.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Purdy.
I might be Councillor Flitter to include those two items, point 1.8 and the aspects of the commercial board. As you've just heard from the Chief Executive, I have to say I do think we are struggling with where the commercial board is at and probably where it's going. I approved its running for the next 12 months to see how it develops. I hear the voices on the wish for some element of the commercialisation aspect within that corporate director role, which I fully support. However, Mr Wilson brings his plans to us, remain to be seen. I do know he's working very hard in that restructuring of CLT and looking at the possibilities of that. And I'm confident that you'll get a good paper on that for us to discuss. So I think there's an element of asking the question, what is commercialisation? What can the commercial board achieve? I have to say, with no disrespect to my previous leader, but I do think the commercial board was raised on a bit of a whim and has not really got any sensible framework to it. And I think that's a need for a discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. But no one else on my list is Councillor Gamble.
Actually, just Councillor Purdy, are we saying that the commercial board is in doubt? Because if it is, then why are we appointing a corporate director to indulge in commercialism if the commercial board is in doubt?
Councillor Purdy, if you want to come back with him.
I would suggest we wait until the Chief Executive produces his paper, which is referred to at least twice. Members, I'm hopeful that you will be patient and see what transpires from that. There are some members, and I know Councillor Flitter is one, who has expressed a wish to see some commercialisation CV within that role. That remains to be seen. And we need to give Mr Wilson time to produce all the components of that. Yes, there is some doubt with what the commercial board are doing at the moment, and we've had discussions on that. But as I said let's run it for 12 months and see what we can do. It's no good just setting up a commercial board and going out there and buying land and buying property. You know, we're a very small authority, we can't do that. So we have to find a sensible way forward, which is why I'm suggesting with the Leaders Advisory Group, we have a discussion about what the commercial board can actually achieve.
Well, nobody else on my list now. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Hands down. Against, please. Abstentions? One abstention. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 11, Capital and Treasury Monitoring 2021. Karen.
This report asks the members to approve the Capital and Treasury Monitoring Report for 2021 and the Minimum Revenue Provision Statement that's shown at Appendix 1. I've nothing to add to the report. I'll answer any questions.
Councillor Tony Morley.
Karen, you've had far too much praise tonight already, so I'm not going to do that. What I will say, however, this is the 5th year I have had the pleasure of sitting through your financial legerdemain. It's quite startling how accurate your propositions and predictions are. So I have absolutely no hesitation in proposing this report as written. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Donnelly.
I'm happy to second the report.
Okay. Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, just one quick question before you ask me to be brief again, Chair. It's the debt rescheduling. Just to prove that I've read all these reports, what parameters are used, or what criteria are used to govern any action taken under this heading? I didn't pick that up in the report.
Could you tell me which part of the report you're looking at?
The debt rescheduling.
We did some debt rescheduling several years ago when we restructured our debt with the advice of our then Treasury Management advisors. At the moment, I don't think we're planning to restructure again because the market's not right for it. The only debt we've got outstanding at the moment is the PWLB loan, and if we were to repay that early, there would be significant financial penalties. So at the moment, it's not in our interest to reschedule that debt.
Could Karen just give me at a later stage the criteria to use for enacting any action on that, please?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Just a quick question, Chair, if I may. It's on table 4 and the asset disposals. It's really just to ask Karen, just for a reminder really, we are likely to receive in the coming financial year 200,000 of capital receipts, presumably from arising from asset disposals. Have these already gone through council for approval? And if so or not, is it possible just to acquaint me of what assets they were or are?
I suspect that the additional income shown under capital receipts relates to our share of the right to buy income as part of the housing stock transfer. Because we normally forecast that forward. It's less easy to forecast other sources of income because until we plan to sell the asset, we won't know that.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Item 12, again, Karen, Capital Strategy Report 2021.
So the purpose of this report is to set a framework to show how all aspects of the capital expenditure will be dealt with. So this includes prioritisation, planning outcomes, management, finance and monitoring. The key part of the report, probably for members, is in section 1.4. That shows the sources of finance we have for capital expenditure and how we'll utilise them. It also describes the governance of the capital programme and the risk management arrangements and the role of prudential indicators.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tony Morley.
Once again, Chair, it's I think she's got a crystal ball stashed away somewhere. Her predictions are incredibly accurate, and I think we all have an enormous amount of trust and confidence in that section. So I'm no hesitation in proposing this, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Donnelly.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Flitter.
Yes, Chair, just very quickly. One question I'm always asked, and contained in this report, is there any update on SIL at all, and how we to approach that? I know we put it on the back burner. I just wonder, is there any update? And also, we don't do this at the moment, but there's been changes on leasing calculations for income. Just wondering if there were any circumstances where that would be beneficial to the state.
Steve.
Chairman, at the moment we're not aware of any opportunities like that making beneficial to us, but like everything else, we do keep it under review.
Thank you very much. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. Show. Thank you. Item 13, Treasury Management Strategy. Karen.
So, the CIPRO Code of Practice requires the Council to approve a Treasury Management Strategy before the start of each financial year. Those members who were here before might remember that I've explained that the Council invests significant sums of money, and in doing so we're exposed to financial risks in terms of potential loss of the funds themselves or fluctuations in interest rates. So it's important that we have a Treasury Management Strategy to assist in identifying, monitoring and controlling risks. The report includes some external context, and one of the things it mentions is coronavirus. It's already out of date, of course, what I put in the report. Today, we've heard that the IMF is providing $50 billion to help fight coronavirus. And it's been said that there will be an impact on interest rates, so various governments and central banks are taking action. The new investment strategy is set out in 1.4 of the report, Table 2 and the notes to it in paragraph 1.46 show the proposed list of counterparties and the limits. Because what we recommend is that we don't put all our eggs in one basket, and we restrict ourselves with how much we can lend to each type of organisation and each individual organisation. The counterparties and the limits have been agreed with Arlene Close, our advisors, and they reflect the risks relating to security, liquidity and yield. Investment limits are set out in the table, in Table 4, and proposed treasury management indicators in section 1.5. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Atkin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations set out in the report. As always, currently do a sterling job, and that long may continue.
Councillor Wakeman.
A sterling job, I'd like to second that, please.
And Councillor Flitter.
Don't say it like that, Chair.
How would you like it?
I know you're getting...
Introducing Councillor Flitter.
My question here is just about the Municipal Bond Agency, which is the alternative to the Public Works Loan Board. I read the article on that, and it seems very negative. I'm just wondering whether there's any casework that's been done on whether that has actually brought any benefit to local authorities.
Well, at the moment, we haven't lent anything to the Municipal Bond Agency. As it says in the report, any decision to borrow from the agency will be the subject of a separate report to Council.
It would be nice to hear any positive, if there are any positives in that, please. Thank you.
Councillor Raw.
I'd like to ask, it might not be possible at this moment in time, but I'd just like some clarity on the £27 million we have in investments. Given that we're signed up to a climate emergency, are those investments in sustainable, are they sustainable investments? Thank you.
Karen. Yeah.
The £27 million that represents surplus monies we get from cash flows. So we collect council tax on behalf of the county and other organisations, and generally we collect it in before we need to pay it out, so that's how it arises. We tend to invest it in a short-term basis, usually with banks and the local authorities. At the moment we don't actually have an ethical investment policy or strategy, but as I say, we do only lend to the organisations that are listed in the report.
Okay. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. It's a technical question, I suppose. It's about negative interest rates in the 1.4.3. I was wondering what our exposure was to any investments that might move to negative interest rates, whether you've done a calculation like it.
I think the only exposure we've got is we've got an investment with the CCLA Property Fund, and that is intended to be a long-term investment. We're still in the early years of that, and we have sort of lost equity on that. However, the interest we're receiving is at a much higher rate than we would have, so that is offsetting the lost equity.
Councillor Butler.
Can I ask that we look at an ethical investment policy which supports the climate change agenda in going forwards?
Karen, did you want to?
I can ask our Treasury Management advisors if they've got any advice. Certainly look into that.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much. Item 14, the corporate investment strategy. Is it half past? I move that we move to go on until we finish, because it's 8:30, ladies and gentlemen. Moved by Councillor Atkin, seconded Councillor Salt. All those in favour? Thank you very much. So we're on to item 14, corporate investment. Karen, thank you.
So I'm asking members to approve these two strategies, the corporate investment strategy and the commercial investment strategy. They set out the approach for the council to explore more commercial opportunities, which might result in a revenue income stream that could help us to achieve a sustainable financial position and balance our budget in future years. While investments can generate significant returns in excess of Treasury management investments, there are of course significantly higher risks associated with them, and these strategies set out a framework for managing those risks. The Council is required to set such strategies before the start of each financial year, but there are no significant changes in these strategies from those which are in place for the current year.
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to move the recommendations as detailed on page 21.
Okay, Councillor Wakeman. Councillor Wakeman, you're seconding.
I'll second it, please.
Beautifully done, okay. Councillor Fliss, I beg your pardon.
I know you wouldn't again, Chair.
How could I?
Finally tonight, I just want some clarification on the strategy use of indicators. If you see on 5.2 of Appendix A, which is page 140, you will see that there's a clause there to assess how councillors have considered total risk exposure. And yet point 23 on page 148 states that indicators should be used for which allows councillors to assess. So the words have been turned around and mean differently. Just wondering which one it is. And just commenting, final comment tonight, is that Councillor Morley indicated he spent 5 years looking at policies and statements from Karen, which have been very useful. I have to say to you tonight, I am celebrating 35 years of being on this council.
And round of course to Karen as well, please, I think. Well, we haven't... Did you have... Were you good to answer that question, Karen? No. You're going to congratulate Councillor Flitter.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Councillor Flitter. Let me have the references.
I'll let you have them after the meeting.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
I put my hand up, I wanted to speak.
Oh, I beg your pardon, sorry.
You wave.
Sorry, okay. Sorry, please, I beg your pardon. Councillor Campbell.
Very quite a small thing, but it's just on the 4.14. The business case will be prepared by a core team of officers. I was just a bit surprised by the choice of the officers of being monitoring, financial and chief exec. I would have thought our regeneration group of being, our in-house specialist business advisors would have been sort of part of the lead of this, since they have the expertise and they already sort of advise our businesses and local. And I would have expected also the new corporate director to be able to take a lead on this. I just wondered, the fact that we haven't got the business orientated part of the authority actually centred on this, is this one of the reasons this strategy is going wrong?
So Steve, did you want to take that up, Karen? Steve will answer that, I think.
I can just add that in terms of the current property team, Giles, my regeneration manager, is part of that team.
Okay. All right, thank you. It's been, sorry, but we'll have to vote again. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Item 15, there's an extension. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, there's an extension. So, it's been, right, what were the numbers? Sorry? How many against? Sorry. Abstentions? One. Councillor Campbell. Thank you. See? All right. Okay. Item 15, senior documents. Councillor Lees? Thank you very much. Councillor Hill? Seconding. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your attention.